We're all about energy, right? The power in our homes, the signals for our phones. But what if the most fundamental energy source is actually inside us? Today, we're diving into this fascinating idea that connects the invisible tech we use every day to the blueprint of our very own bodies. It sounds like a simple question, doesn't it? But the answer, well, it's a lot more complicated than you might think. And before you answer, just consider this. You almost certainly already believe in and totally rely on invisible energy every single minute of your day.
I mean, seriously, think about it. You trust Wi-Fi to get you online, right? You trust Bluetooth to connect your headphones. Radio signals, satellite signals, they're bringing you stuff from all over the planet. You can't see a single one of them, but you believe they're there. Why? Because they work. So here's the kicker. What if this whole idea isn't new at all? What if it's actually ancient? And that brings us right to our first big idea here, the human signal. You could almost call it the original wireless technology. Okay, so what's so wild about this is the argument that all our cool wireless tech, well, it's not actually a new invention. The idea is that it's more of a reflection, maybe even a rediscovery, of a biological system that's already running inside every single one of us. It's like we are the original blueprint for the very tech we think is so advanced. So if we're the blueprint, what does that map even look like? Let's dive into our next section and start exploring the different parts of this energetic blueprint of yours. All right, our journey starts with something the source material calls your auric field. The easiest way to think about it, it's like your own personal atmosphere, a bubble of energy that's all around you, interacting with everything. And this is such a great way to picture it. You know how the Earth has its geomagnetic field, that massive shield protecting us from solar radiation? Well, the idea is that we have our own personal protective energy field, just like that. It's a really cool parallel, right? We're like a tiny version of the planet's own energy system. Okay, let's go a little deeper into the system. Now we get to the idea of chakras. And it's important to think of these less as single, isolated points and more like a whole network. They're described as energy grids or channels that are woven throughout your entire energy field, kind of like the energy grid lines that some believe span the entire planet. And then we have Kundalini. If chakras are the grid, you can think of Kundalini as the main power line feeding that grid. It's described as this really powerful current of energy, just kind of sitting dormant at the base of your spine. And the way to switch it on and draw it up to the brain is through things like yoga, meditation, and some really deep self-reflection. I know, this might all be sounding a little out there, a bit abstract. But what's fascinating is how the source material actually ties these ideas to concepts from modern physics. So let's see how that works as we get into Section 3, an illusion of solid. Now, this is a really bold statement. The idea that your body, the chair you're in, the screen you're looking at, that none of it is actually solid. It's a huge concept to wrap your head around, for sure, but it's actually rooted in a very specific scientific understanding of our physical world. You know, this ancient idea actually has a name. It's called Maya. That's the term for this concept that everything we perceive as solid matter is really just an illusion, something our senses create for us. So, how on earth could that be true? Right, that's the big question, isn't it? How can this world that feels so real, so solid, the one we touch and see every day, how could it possibly be an illusion? Well, the answer comes from looking at what everything is actually made of. Okay, let's break this down. First, we know everything is made of atoms, right? Basic science. But here's the thing. Atoms aren't solid little marbles. They're actually almost entirely empty space with tiny particles held together by forces. And when you zoom in even further to a subatomic level, there's just massive amounts of space between everything. So that feeling of something being solid, it's really just an illusion, an effect created by these atoms vibrating and being held super, super close to each other. And that scientific fact, that reality, leads us right to the very edge of what we currently understand, which brings us perfectly to our final section, the next frontier. So think about it. If the world isn't really solid, then what is that invisible force that holds all these atoms and particles together? This is really where science meets a huge mystery. We've talked about how, just like the Wi-Fi we all use without a second thought, our own bodies might be running on a similar system of invisible fields and energy. So maybe the real next frontier isn't just about exploring outer space, but also exploring our inner space. It's about looking into the possibility that the very same energy that shapes the entire universe is the exact same energy that's shaping you,